Classical conditioning is common to anyone who owns cats. I am no exception to this. If that sounds strange, let me put it this way. Cats have a very good sense of time. They're particular and they'll wake you up at exactly the right time every single morning if they've learned what that time is. They will learn sounds that mean treats, smells that indicate who's coming or going. They are very particular and they've got a good memory. Cats train people and people train cats. Although I suppose condition is the best word in this situation. With that in mind, what is classical conditioning? Classical conditioning was a concept coined by Pavlov. If Pavlov's dogs sound familiar, that's why. It's a fairly simple concept, but it's got some vocabulary, so let's get into that. It involves unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response, neutral stimulus, and a conditioned response. So you start with a unconditioned stimulus. This is something that induces a response without you needing to induce that response or train it or condition the creature or person to do the thing. And then you have a unconditioned response, which is that response to the unconditioned stimulus. Then you have your neutral stimulus, which is a thing that does not necessarily induce a response. And your conditioned response, which is when the unconditioned stimulus happens to the neutral response rather than the unconditioned stimulus. If that sounds confusing, let's explain. With cats. I had a cat, Oscar, and Oscar really liked the smell of tuna. In this case, and he really liked to eat tuna, which is why he liked the smell of tuna. In this case, his unconditioned response was him running up for tuna, as shown here with him happily displaying his belly or his sign of joy for tuna. And the unconditioned stimulus was the smell of tuna. I needed a can opener for tuna, and thus the sound of the can opener was the neutral stimulus. Eventually, he came running for the sound of the can opener in order to get tuna. This became the conditioned response when he was summoned for the sound of a can opener rather than the smell of tuna, as was shown when he came running for the sound of can opener when I was just trying to make tomato sauce rather than anything else. Ignore the fact that the can is still labeled tuna. Now, this classical conditioning is not the only type of conditioning, and Oscar, who I loved very much, he was a very good boy. We found him in the trash, that's why his name was Oscar. Was not the only cat I had. I also had a cat named Henry. Henry was my cat more than anyone else, but he conditioned people instead of being conditioned. He was closer to using operant conditioning. Every single day at 9:00 p.m., he decided that it was going to be a great idea to use reinforcements on us, a negative reinforcement because he was removing a negative stimulus by stopping his barrage of meowing when we finally went upstairs and went to bed. Now, maybe it's not accurate to say that he only did this when my whole family went upstairs and went to bed. He was usually satisfied when it was just me. He was a very, very good boy. He was my good boy. Cats, and more importantly, or more interestingly, my cats can show great demonstrations of how classical conditioning and operant conditioning work, and the differences between the two. They're great examples of how to understand them. So let's discuss the function of classical versus operant conditioning. Classical conditioning, you just associate something with something else. So you associate the neutral stimulus with the unconditioned stimulus to create a conditioned response. That shifts the unconditioned response to the neutral stimulus is no longer neutral. In operant conditioning, you use punishers and reinforcers to induce a wanted behavior. So, for example, a cat yelling at certain times to get their owner to do what they want. So let's give an example of when you can use both again, with cats, there's something called clicker training. You want to first use classical conditioning. Cats are very food motivated, so you get a treat, you give the cat a treat, the cat will want to eat the treat, it will probably, salivate or get excited or come running for the treat. That's your unconditioned response. And your unconditioned stimulus is going to be the treat. Your neutral stimulus is going to be your clicker. It makes a little click sound, like you click it, you give the cat a treat. You click it, you give the cat a treat until it starts associating the treat with the clicker. That is now your conditioned stimulus, your conditioned response. Conditioned stimulus is the stimulus that has been conditioned. Now you can use the conditioned stimulus as positive, as a reward, as positive reinforcement to get the cat to do things as basically a reward. So that is how you use operant conditioning in conjunction with classical conditioning. So that is how I have personally experienced classical conditioning, and to a lesser extent operant conditioning, with my late cats, Oscar and Henry. Thank you so much for watching.